very special occasion in Stamfordham Church. And on behalf of St Mary's Church and the PCC, we welcome you, all of you, to this wonderful William Dixon homecoming concert. And in particular, we welcome those who travel a long way. A lot of people come a long way for this very special occasion. Particularly, we welcome Matt at Seattle for initiating the concert, an inspirational idea to bring it here, back to the home of William Dixon, and also a warm welcome to all the performers who we very much look forward to hearing. We're also most grateful to the William Dixon Foundation who have promoted the evening, and to both the Lowland and Border Piper Society and the Northumbrian Piper Society for their generous support for this occasion. William Dixon is one of our favourite and famous sons, having been baptised here in this church in 1678 and buried with many of his family in the churchyard, the Stamfordham St Mary's Churchyard. Matt, St Seattle, and Julia say will definitely provide us with much information of its importance to our local culture. I'm asked to make sure that everybody has turned off their mobile phones. When we break for the interval, there will be refreshments and snacks at the back of the church. And we also invite everybody to wander around and enjoy the historic church, and particularly to look at the William Dixon Family Memorial on the north wall by the chancel entrance. I now hand you over to Julia, who will give a little historical information about William Dixon and his connection with the area and with the origin of the pipes. Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. William Dixon, there were four of them. It's incredibly complicated. They're an extended family living mainly in Fenwick, which for those of you who are not local is a small hamlet about a mile west of here, and Ingoe, which is 2 miles further on top of a hill. The first reference I can find to the family definitely is in the muster rolls of 1538. Henry VIII decided that he needed to know how many fighting men were available in the borders. There were 2 Dixons, Edward and Ingram at Ingoe, and James at Fenwick. They were neither well-horsed nor harnessed, it says. However, their landlord was, I think it was Sir Ralph Fenwick, who was living at Fenwick at the time, in Fenwick Tower, which is now sort of accessible, was their landlord. He was deputy keeper, deputy warden of the Middle March, with special responsibility for quelling North Tynedale, which basically in those days was a licence to do whatever way he wanted to get the job done. It can't be a coincidence that the Dixon family started their rise to considerable prosperity over the ensuing years till the union of the kingdoms. The Reaver culture went on for some years after 1603. I found one reference in the quarter sessions to a Dixon who stole 5 sheep and a wether and in 1629, so some 20 years after all this sort of thing was supposed to have been stopped. So they weren't entirely respectable, but they quickly achieved respectability. The parish records for this parish don't start until 1660. Until then we're reliant on the county history and the references available in it, some of which are extremely obscure and difficult to find, even in these days of the internet. In 1660, a William Dixon, because as I say there were over several generations, was a church warden in this parish. He and his brothers and members of his extended family were respectable members of the parish, so they weren't either Catholic or openly Catholic, because they would have failed the test acts that would have been in place at the time, nor were they nonconformists of any sort. They must have been sufficiently conforming to be part of the Anglican community here. The records are not entirely comprehensive, and as I say, it was an extended family. The first generation of interest is some adults who were flourished in the 1690s. There was a Percival Dixon who was apprenticed in Newcastle in the 1690s to a scrivener. That's a professional writer, or he would have been taught writing, legal Latin documentation. He probably would also have been taught heraldry. Those of you who will have seen this memorial and who will see it will see what I mean. I think the top portion of that memorial was done by Percival Dixon because he had the skills, possibly assisted by a stonemason, but the artistic bit of it required considerable skill of the sort which he would have learnt. Percival had what was probably a brother called Robert. He entered the church and had considerable patronage. In 1696, I think William and Mary would have been on the throne, yes, still, or was it just William? And he became vicar of Aldermaston down in Berkshire, a post he held until 1729, which makes him a close relation to the vicar of Bray, because the religious sort of ambience of the times changed several times in that period. And Robert Dixon of Aldermaston has descendants who I have corresponded with briefly and shared information with. And the third brother, there was a William and there was a John. Now these names occur in generation after generation. I can't directly link those four to William Dixon Senior, who is the first one mentioned on the memorial here, but there was William Senior of Fenwick and William Junior of Fenwick, and they were both having children baptised at the same time. So unless the parish clerk recorded which one the children actually belonged to, it's a huge disentangling job to work out exactly who is related to who. We know that the manuscript was written after 1721 because one of the tunes in it was about a chap called Jackie Layton who died in 1721, and the tune was composed very shortly thereafter, we think, and it spread very widely through the British Isles. He was Irish. It's beautifully written, the book. It's quite small, apparently. I've not seen the original, although I've got scans. The music itself is written in one hand. It's one person has written it, but there are title pages and names in it which are in several hands. There is a Percival Dixon, a John Dixon, and a William Dixon, and it was that combination of names, particularly the Percival, that initially led Matt here. There are Dixons here and around about here, and there is another patch of Dixons up by Holy Island and on the mainland, and there are none in between in the Morpeth area. Hello, sorry, yes?
I just think it might be interesting to know that we inherited many melodies, and one of them said that William Dixon bought, I think, about £630 and £6.5 peppercorn then, Hawkwell House from Charles Swinburne, and that was in the late 1600s, so that might be of interest as well.
I'll speak to you later. Yes, thank you. By the time we get to the date of the manuscript, there are two dates on it, 1733 and 1738. The Dixon family, and I have to use it as a kind of unit, were doing quite well for themselves. They inhabited probably Low Hall, Ingoe. There are three buildings called Hall at Ingoe, although it's a small village. There's North Hall, of which only the stable block, I think it is, it still exists. There's South Hall, which is a beautiful building built in the 1670s by the Shafto family, or one branch of it. And there's Low Hall, which now is a large farmstead and contains within its fields the remains of the medieval village, which was wasted in the 14th century. William Dixon, the William Dixon family, the Percival Dixon, by the 1730s had a house in Newcastle on Westgate Street, somewhere near the assembly rooms. We haven't pinpointed the number exactly, we think we have, but we've yet to work out which building it might have been in place of. They weren't what we would rudely refer to as peasants. They were middling sorts. They were prosperous tenant farmers. Some of them were owners. William Dixon was well off enough to lend money to an impoverished member of the Shafto family at one point. I'm jumping about a little bit in time here. On the memorial here we have William Dixon Sr. and his wife Isabel of Ingoe. They're Low Hall. They had a numerous family, and unfortunately quite a few of them died in infancy. So there was a William who died aged 2, there was another one who died aged 1, and the William that survived to age 24 was actually the youngest of about 10 children. I think that the manuscript came from William Senior, who is on the memorial, to his son John. John ran at one stage a small coal mine, which, for those of you who do know the area, as you go from here to Fenwick, there's a little wood opposite Fenwick Tower, and I think it was there. There were numerous small coal mines throughout Northumberland which supplied the local area, the very local areas. His son, William, took over the coal mine, and by now we're in the 1740s, 1750s, 1760s, getting up to with William. And John left his property to William, who went off to Scotland, having managed the coal mine here, and did quite well for himself managing a coal mine near Glasgow. His son bought an ironworks at a time when the Industrial Revolution was happening, and did extremely well for himself. If you Google William Dixon Ironmaster Glasgow, he was one of the really big foundry owners. By the end of his life he had a country estate, he had a cottage over near Perth, and that, I think, is how the manuscript left here and went up to Scotland. It went with the William Dixon who was born in 1753. So it would have left Northumberland perhaps in about 1790. But once the music was written out, it wasn't altered at all. There are a few annotations in the book where obviously a child has got hold of it, and there are little drawings and scribbles on it, which don't add enormously to our knowledge, but it hasn't been defaced in any way. Matt concentrated on the music. Because he plays the pipes that we believe most of it was played on. It's written in a bagpipe scale, I think that's fair to say. Some of the tunes are readily playable on what we now call the Northumbrian small pipes. Some of them are naturally more suited to the border pipes, the bigger pipes. Both were played in the area. This was a hugely important area for piping. In the village we have the ancestors of the Reed family, who became very famous pipe makers in North Shields around 1800, and who added keys to the instrument and turned it into what Northumbrian small pipers play today. To the west of us we have at Chipchase Castle Colonel John Reed, who was the colonel of one of the Northumberland militia regiments in the Napoleonic Wars, and he commissioned a set of border pipes which still exists and is in the Morpeth Chantry Museum. So there were pipes in the area. This was also a way that travellers went north and south. There were routes over the hills, and we know there were traveller families who played. I think, but I haven't yet proved it, that we have an uncle of the infamous Jimmy Allen living at Little Bavington Mill, no longer exists, but you could see where it would be, about 4 miles from Ingoe. So there is a huge musical community. What we don't know is whether any of the William Dixons themselves actually played, or whether they were writing the music down that was in the area. And I don't think we ever will. Matt would love to think of William. We would love to think that the music was played in this church, but whether it was
in the pub across the road.
More likely in the pub across the road. I think that's fair comment. So the manuscript went north into Scotland, was retrieved from an elderly chap on the Athol estate by a lady who rejoiced in the name of Lady Dorothea Bruggles Rice, a member of the Athol family, and she bought it and said it was jigs and reels of the border country, which, yes, it is. And then it disappeared from sight again until a chap called Mick Backus and Matt, I think, discovered it more or less simultaneously, and Matt just took it from there, really, which is exactly what I think we should do now. During the interval, I'd be delighted to sort of ramble on about the memorial behind me. Do come and have a look if you haven't seen it. But meanwhile, I think I should hand over to Matt and the musical section of the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia, for that tour de force. Yes.
Somewhat truncated, but there you go.
Yeah. Some of the Dixon music is a little different from the music we're used to. And when people are coming to it for the first time, I always point them to the same tune, which I regard as the entry point to the music. It's a tune that Mr. Dixon called Heel and Laddie, but it's not the well-known Scottish Heel and Laddie, so I've given it the kind of nickname Dixon's Heel and Laddie. And because that to me is the entry point into the music, it's an accessible tune, we'll begin with that. And if you think it's strange that a tune from the Borders is called Heel and Laddie, it's not that strange, because if it was a tune from the Heelands, it would just be called Laddie. playing a selection of solos, duos, trios, quartets and quintets, and that covers it, doesn't it, actually? I get the next spot. I'm going to begin with a version of a tune which is in Mr. Dixon's book. It's called, he calls it Cut and Dry Dolly, New Way. Now, it's widely believed that the Cut and Dry Dolly refers to the corn dolly of the Harvest Festival, which was put together at the time of the festival, kept over the winter, and then buried with the new seed so that it carried over the spirit of the last year's crop into the new crop. And in a way, I like to think of that as a metaphor of William Dixon's book, because he wrote it down, and in a sense, the music was buried for a couple of hundred years, and then it's come back and it's producing this new crop. Part of which you see, a little sheaf of which we have here. So, Cut and Dry Dolly is the tune. Now, what I've done with the version that I play is I've taken his version and a version which was recorded a little later in the century in Scotland, and another version which was recorded a little later in Newcastle, and they kind of diverged near the beginning of the tune, and I've attempted to bring them together. So my version has elements of all the historical versions and some new ones as well. So this is Cut and Dry Dolly, and I wouldn't like to say it's the new way or the old way, it's just my way. for being partners in my insanity. Can you hear the music? Great. I shall stand up and speak up. I'd like to thank Morag and Iain for being partners in my insanity. So you can hear the music it's not quite easy listening. So I'm going to contrast it with something which is more easy listening. This is a tune which I'm going to ask everybody who wants to join me on to join me. It's one I wrote the year before I took up playing the pipes. I was already a fiddle player at that time. And it's inspired by the holy island of Lindisfarne. And as a little connection, I was pleased to notice when I saw the vicarage building, that out of its walls, you've got a fine crop of red valerian, which is a plant I first became aware of when I was playing a wedding at Lindisfarne Castle. So there's a tenuous link with the red valerian and Lindisfarne. And you'll find it, I hope, no less pleasurable, but more easy to listen to than the last item. So.
Thank you.
friend and colleague, Pete Stewart, who, like myself, has come down from the other side of the border. But we've not come to steal your cattle today, just to borrow your ears for a little while. So, Pete Stewart.
I'm going to play, thank you, I'm going to play a couple of sets of tunes on Scottish small pipes. The small pipes in Scotland were revived about 40 years ago now. I used to say 30 years, but it isn't 30 years anymore, is it?
Now the full people at the back.
Sorry, I'm playing the Scottish small pipes. In Dixon's time, the Scottish small pipes would have been a rather different instrument. The chanter would probably have been about half this size and a lot higher pitched. When they were revived in the late 70s, early 80s, they decided to make them in an imperial pitch. So it's now a lot lower than it used to be. I'm going to play two tunes from a manuscript slightly older than the Dixon one, from Newcastle, from a fiddle player called Henry Atkinson, about whom I know next to nothing. His manuscript was written down in 1695 or thereabouts, and contains a lot of fiddle tunes, but also contains a number of tunes which look very much like they were bagpipe tunes. You don't have to do anything to them in order to be able to play them on this instrument. And two tunes. The first is called Cruds and Way, and the second one he calls Saw You Not My Meggie. Both tunes appear in Scotland. Is that what he calls it? I couldn't read. Cruds and Way. Anyway, when they appear in Scotland, they have different titles, and the one that's called Cruds and Way in Atkinson's manuscript is called What I Got Late Yestreen, in a fiddle manuscript from the northeast of Scotland. But someone's recently found a set of words which say that what he got late yestreen was actually Curds and Whey, which is wrong. So there's two tunes. To start with, I'm going to play a very brief section from the old Border tune to the Twa Corbies, the Ballad of the Twa Corbies, which everyone knows now to a tune which I think came originally from Brittany. So yeah, we'll play that. to play a Dixon tune now that I first played. Well, it was the first Dixon tune I played, and I acquired my tattered copy of Matt's publication not very long after he published it in 1995. It still says 1995 on the page where I wrote my name. And I played this tune in 1996 in the Lowland Border Pipes competition, and I played it in 2006, and believe me, I'm going to play it next. It's called Cuddy Clauder.
On the poster you may have seen, I talked about the wild border melodies blending with the the Baroque, and that's what you get with the figures in a tune, like little, which you might expect to hear in a Baroque recorder piece. Now, some of that style was transferred directly to the Northumbrian smallpipes, of which Mr. Chris Ormston of Ovinger is one of the world's most famous and best exponents, and he's here tonight with you.
Right, should we do our bit first? Or?
Yes.
Yes, let's do our bit.
Which one do you want to do?
Let's do Wally. Yes, Northumbrian smallpipes, just sort of continue on from what Julie was saying about Robert Reid. Most of the set was made by Robert Reid and North Shields sometime before 1837 when he died. And they belonged to, previously they belonged to young Tom Clough's son. And I was very fortunate to get hold of them. The tune we're going to play first is one called Wally as the Marquis Ran. That does not make any sense. It's a grand little tune.
Check our tune,
Wally as the Marquis Ran. If you can't remember that, just shout out, where's Wally? Julia also mentioned a man called Jackie Layson, who died in 1721, and there was a tune in his honour in the Dixon manuscript within 15 years or so. That tune kept getting played and kept getting modified, so it appeared in the John Peacock collection 60 years later, and it was written down by Tom Clough in about 1930 for his son, who played this set, to learn. And the tune obviously evolved over time. But it's a great tune. The story is that Jackie Layton did a dance, and I can't remember where from
Dublin to Morristown.
Dublin to Morristown, and died in the process. The moral of the story is, don't do folk dancing. Right, Jackie Layton, or Jackie Layton as it's called in many manuscripts.
A tune which is not a Dixon tune, but it's in the same kind of idiom as the Dixon music. It's a type of tune which is not played much nowadays. It's a hornpipe in 3-time rather than 4-time. And the strange thing about this tune, just draw your attention to our friend. We have a bat circulating.
There's two or three of them.
2 or 3 of them, right. The strange thing about this tune, which is a genuine 18th century tune is it was obviously written to be played by Morag and myself because it's called Old Age and Young. Nice and gentle. Mr. Iain Gelston.
Thank you. I want to sit down just to avoid Batman. Do you know that bat has slept peacefully above that door all day while we've been in here playing bagpipes? So it's obviously you lot who've walked along for it. I'm going to play a piece from the William Dixon manuscript, which is very old. It was old in William's time, but we still know it now, and you'll all know it. I won't tell you what it's known as now, but I'll give you a musical clue at the start. William knew it as Canny Willie Foster. Willie Foster was a parliamentary candidate for, was it Berwick? Bamborough. Gamma the B.
The most corrupt election in British history, apparently.
So, Canny Willie Foster, the mystery tune at the start. Guess the mystery tune. Half of them are buried in this churchyard, I think, the shaft doors. You might have noticed that the William Dixon music is a very particular style. It's full of these fast runs and variations and things like that. But there was one tune that appeared in William's book which kind of stands out from all the rest. And popular at the time, in the late 1600s, early 1700s, was a French dance called a minuet. And they appeared in lots of fiddle collections. One of them appears in William's book. It really stands out. So I'm going to play that one. It's called, is it King? Edward II. Don't know why. The second tune I'm going to play is another one which stands out in a different collection. Later in the 1700s and the early 1700s, one of the tune types that became really popular were marches, patriotic marches. I presume it was because of Napoleonic Wars or whatever. And they kind of stood out from the tradition as well. So the second one is written by John Peacock, who made a collection of music in Newcastle in around 1800, 1805. The tune that he wrote actually appears later in the tune book of Robert Buick, who was the son of Thomas the engraver.
last number before the interval. And so I'm going to play two tunes. The first one I'm sure lots of you will recognise. It's from the Dixon manuscript. It's Apprentice Lads of Alnwick, and I think it's probably the most sort of widely known tune that's found in the manuscript. And actually the version that's there is surprisingly similar to the version that you hear played all over the place nowadays. So anyway, I'll play the manuscript version. And after that, there's a dance tune called Kissed Her Under the Coverlet, which is from the manuscript of a fiddle player called William Vickers, who was from Northumberland. It's a wee bit later than the time of Dixon, about a century later than that. But actually then, in the second half of this concert, you're going to hear a much slower tune, which is in the Dixon manuscript, which is basically the same tune, but just about recognisable as the same tune. So here we go.
going to start off with a tune which Vickers had as Adam of a Bell, and then appeared 60 years later in the Peacock manuscript as My Dearie Sits Our Late Up. Then it appeared again in the Clough manuscripts around the 1930s, again called My Dearie Sits Our Late Up. And the remarkable thing is how little this tune changed over that period of time, from 1730 whatever through to 1930. So
2015.
And 2015, yes. So in 1730 something was called Adam of Bell. In 1800 it was called My Dearie Sits Our Late Up. In 1930 it was called My Dearie Sits Our Late Up. And in our house these days, in 2015, it's called Mrs. Ormston's Lament. Because there's a ditty which goes with this, which says, My dearie sits our late up, me hinny sits our late up, me dearie sits our late up between the pint pot and the cup. I hold my hands up, but not while I'm talking.
through this because you can't hear me at the back. I think Morag and I are going to play, I'm not going to do the bagpipes that I was going to do because this one was so nice earlier on, even though we kind of sort of forgot bits of it. It's quite long. It's a tune, it's the tune which Morag played earlier on, which is called Kiss Me Under the Coverlet.
Yeah.
Yeah. The version in William Dixon's book is called Saw You Never a Bonny Lass. And I started playing it a few years ago, and although the music in Dixon's book is dance music really, this one just cried out to be sweet and lovely and slow. So that's how we're going to play it, hopefully.
next set, then the first tune is called Athol Braes, and it's from the McFarlane manuscript, which Matt put me on to just a couple of weeks ago. Has an email from him saying, Morag, there's this tune in that manuscript with your name on it. So I immediately went to the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh and sort of got a look at this manuscript. It's the first time I've ever done that, and it was the most exhilarating experience, just have the actual book in front of you and sort of sitting there with my manuscript paper and pencil copying this tune out. So that's going to be the first tune, and then after that is another tune from the William Vickers manuscript, the Fiddler's manuscript that I told you about before. This time a version of the Dixon tune Hit Her Between the Legs. And then the third tune in the set is the Flagon Reel.
requisitioned Morag and Iain to play a set of tunes, all the same tune, starting off with a version more or less contemporary with Dixon, but from Scotland, and then Dixon's version, and then the way it's sung in Scotland today, a tune called Tail Tuddle. A lot of Dixon's tunes have versions in Scotland. For instance, that tune that I played, Cuddy Clauder, that I played earlier on, has a version in a Scottish manuscript. They tend to be slightly different. You may get the first 4 bars first and the second four bars second, or you may get them the other way around. That kind of difference. Dixon's version of Tail Tuddle is slightly different to the normal one, but so I'm going to have to keep glancing over my shoulder, otherwise I'll get very confused.
I've switched to fiddle, and at the very start of the concert, then there's a guy called Tim Rolls somewhere here, over there with his hand up, who showed me this fiddle in the sort of oldest looking case I've ever seen. Apparently it was made by somebody who was the
parish clerk of this parish from 1760 to 1790. He also taught music in the school, and he presumably helped with the choir. And his name was Matthew Coulson.
So this is Matthew Coulson's fiddle, and apparently it may have been played by James Hill as well. The original owner of the fiddle was taught fiddle by James Hill, who a few of you will know as sort of the ultimate fiddle player of this area. So that's what I'm playing from now on.
Don't break it.
I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the tune. This will be the last of the individual items, and then we'll join together at the end for a reprise of the opening Highland Abbey. The tune I'm going to play is called Dorrington Lads, or as it would be pronounced in those days, Dorrington Lads with the Northumbrian and Border. And Dorrington is not a place which is known nowadays, but you'll find it next to Wooler as Doddington. It's where they make a particularly delicious brand of ice cream, which I highly recommend. The other week, we had my partner's grandson, and we thought we'd, for the Easter holidays, it was a splendid Easter Sunday, we thought we'd go over there, excuse for a ride and to give him some nice ice cream. But we found that the Doddington ice cream place is not a shop, it's only a factory. If you want to get the actual ice cream, you have to go somewhere else. But we had a walk around the village, and we looked in the church, and there were two ladies who were leaving with the service, and we got talking to them, and I asked them about the rhyme that was associated with Dorrington Lads, and if they knew anything about it, because I was kind of hoping that someone would have a few more lines to it. They didn't, but they kindly pointed me to the little history of the parish, and on the back, at the foot, is the little rhyme about the Dorrington Lads, which I'd never heard of. But the chorus is, a lot of these tunes, they have words associated with them, and some of the words are beautiful poetry, some of them are licentious, and some of them are just kind of like nursery rhymes. And this is one of those. Dorrington Lads is bonny, and Dorrington Lads is canny, and I'll hear Dorrington Lad and hide a Dorrington cuddy. So it's not profound, but it's lovely to find words associated with the tune. Now, the thing about the tune is Northumbrian pipers have all heard of Dorrington Lads, and some of them can play it. But what was always an anomaly for a couple of hundred years really was the fact that this tune enjoyed such a high status in Northumbrian piping law. But it was really, it was a decent enough tune, but there wasn't that much to it. It wasn't more special than any of the other tunes. But the version in the Dixon book turns that on its head. It's the longest tune in the book. It has 14 strains, rather than just the standard A and B of a reel or a jig. It has 14. It goes up to, what's that in the alphabet? I don't know. It goes past M anyway. So it's a long piece of music, but it's full of really radical musical ideas. And the sort of ideas it has in it are, if you'd be familiar with American minimalist composers of the 20th century, Terry Riley, John Adams, there's passages in it where you get the same figure repeating and repeating in a kind of hypnotic, arabesque way. And there are other parts which have very unusual figures which only actually make sense on the pipes under the fingers. You couldn't really play them, you wouldn't think of them on the fiddle, but on the pipes they make a lot of sense. And these figures I call loups, which is quite coincidental, as Iain here belongs to a band called Loup. And Loup, if you don't know what it means, it's the Northumbrian and the Scottish word for to leap or to jump. So this tune, Dorrington Lads, is just very, very unusual, and it was the thing which struck me most about the manuscript when I first looked at it. And it still amazes me. It's not a sing-along tune, despite the fact that it has words. It goes into some strange and exotic places. And I'm still really finding corners and wrinkles in it that are new to me, even after 20 years. There was one further thing I have to say about the Dixon book, which was that when it came into the knowledge of people other than the people who had been looking after it, it was through the agency of a Scottish aristocrat called Lady Dorothea Ruddles Bryce, who was a traditional music enthusiast. She was a friend of a fiddler in the village of Ingoe called Charles Mackintosh. And he showed her this book, which was the Dixon book. And he said, would you like this book? It's no use to me. Come and make head nor tail of it. And she looked at it and she said, yeah, this is really interesting. I'd very much like to have that. Can I offer you anything for it? And Charlie Mackintosh took the huff at being offered money for something that he was quite happy to give freely. So he threw it in the fire. This is true. She pulled it out of the fire with her bare hands. And she says, I still have it. And it is a book of pipe jigs of the border country. And this was in 1919 that she said this. Now, the book passed after her death into the library at Perth. And it had been noted a few times by scholars through the 20th century, but apart from Lady Dorothea, no one had identified it as pipe music, let alone pipe music of the border country. And it was someone that I was in touch with, a Scottish fiddle scholar called Charles Gore, who alerted me to it. So I didn't discover it, I was alerted to its existence. And this was 20 years ago, and what you see today is some of the ripples of that discovery. And there are people who play these tunes, not many people, but people all over the world that play them. When people ask me, what's the significance of the Dixon collection, I say, it's very, very, very significant to very, very, very few people. So I do thank you for sharing in this tonight. So I think this is a moment that I couldn't really imagine that I'd be playing Dorrington Lads, the Dixon version, in Dixon's Church. I don't know how it'll go. I don't even know if I'll be there when it happens, because sometimes you just blank out. We've got a grate here, which I'm very worried about if I bang that. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. John is recording over there. Everything like that, he picks up. So, I think what I'll do is... a reprise of the opening item. Now, Iain Nicholson will say a few words after we close, but again I'd like to thank you for coming, and I'd like to invite you to William Dixon's Facebook page if you're interested. There are seriously lots of links to different performances of many of the tunes, many more than you've heard tonight, and I think pretty well everyone that's here tonight has some performances on the Facebook page. I should also explain that the William Dixon Foundation is not so much an organisation, but an idea. The idea that it's a good foundation for revival of border pipe music. So if you use Facebook, just look for William Dixon Foundation and you'll get all the latest news from 1733.
Before we do this tune, I really need to say a big thank you to Matt. First of all to Lady Ruggles Bryce.
And to William Dixon.
And to William Dixon. But especially to Matt, because we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him.
While we're on it, I really have to do the same to Chris, because if it wasn't for this, and I can't use the word in church, noble fellow, this noble fellow, I wouldn't have ever done this in the first place. I'd still be a happy fiddler. So thank you, Chris. So we'll play you out as we played you in with Dixon's Heelan Laddie. And you can hear the way the music goes, Bonnie laddie, Heelan Laddie, at the end of every line. And there's many, many sets of words to this tune. I think we'll begin a bit more positively than that. 1, 2, 3.
evening, so enjoyable, and the group have engaged us with warmth and real talent. I'd like to thank each one of the group, Iain, Chris, Pete and Morag, and especially Matt for putting in so much effort into this concert. I know that it hasn't been just completely off the cuff. There's been a lot of preparation, and I know a lot of the tunes and presentations have had a lot of careful thought and preparation and rehearsal put into them. So we've had something very special from all the artists. I'd also like to thank Julia for, at the start, giving us a wonderful resume of the work of William Dixon. I mean, it is absolutely astonishing to think that a manuscript was produced in the 17th century, and this is really the oldest original manuscript in the British Isles on piping music. And when we think that this really all started in Stamfordham, I think we've all got to realise that in the 17th century, Stamfordham and the surrounding area was a hotbed of piping music. And I'd like to think that we would be able to continue this, and that the group would come back. We will come back to Dixon's Church. It would be lovely to see you on another occasion. We can't guarantee to have 3 bats flying about, but we will try.
Not coming without that. Before Iain wraps up, I'd like to thank everyone involved from the church, and in particular Peter Lombard. When I phoned him up with the suggestion, I was a bit nervous. What would they think of this? He nearly bit my hand off, and he was so enthusiastic about having it here, and he's been a fantastic help all the way through with the organisation, the liaising, putting posters up, all the catering arrangements. I mean, he hasn't done everything, but he's coordinated everything, and a big special thank you to Peter, who's at the back there.
So thank you very much indeed, Matt. Let's hope this might be inaugural, and maybe there will be other concerts here, because this can be a real centre of Northumbrian and Border piping. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. It's been a very special evening, and I'd like to wish everybody a safe journey home. And just before we close, I'd like to close with the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen. Thank you very much indeed.